Welcome to another episode of I Am Maria podcast, a space where we explore the impact stories that inspire us to be who we are today, showing how our personal decisions and tools shape shapes our life. Every story we share creates a ripple effect, sometimes small, sometimes transformative. And in this episode, we're going to explore how alignment, belonging, and self trust can become acts of leadership. Chris Rollins believes that small moments matter, and through his work, he teaches leaders to build trust, courage, and authenticity in a world that often rewards control. At I Am Maria podcast today, we believe in your ripple effect, Chris,
Mm.
especially the one that begins with a story told honestly like yours. Thank you so much for being here.
It is a pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, Chris, I heard you in one conference a couple of years ago, and I was so inspired by your story, by what you were doing. I know you're being in a constant evolution. And I hope that we can hear a little bit about everything today. But I want to start with a very important question. I think this is the one that really defined us, and it's very hard sometimes to define ourselves, to understand who we are. So let me start for who is Chris Rollins?
Mm. Way to just dive right in. I love it. The who is Chris Rollins? I mean, I guess the way I want to answer that is through I've done a lot of work around values as a growing adult all through my professional career, even as a younger person, really trying to answer that question, who am I? And when I was going through a big transition out of my big corporate job into what I'm doing now as a speaker and workshop facilitator, I think this is the work that was critical for helping to make that decision. So I spent a lot of time reflecting, working with coaches, going through exercises to help me really clearly define my values, which have really become the following. The first is to lead with vulnerability, kindness, um, and empathy. The second is to listen first, to 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 create space for people to share and to feel safe. The third is to reserve judgment. The fourth is to see the potential in people, and the last is to enjoy the journey. And I think if I'm being honest, that's probably the hardest one for me as someone who has been growing my business for the past 6 years, because we're in a big way chasing success, and uh, the goalpost is always moving. We hit milestones, but then it moves and then it moves, and so it's very easy to be in this space of not feeling like we're ever arrived. And so I really bring that value front and center because it's a reminder for me to enjoy the process, enjoy the journey as I go. And so that's one view into who is Chris Rollins, just thinking about my values, the things that are important to me, seeing the potential in people, reserving judgment, um, listening, leading with vulnerability and kindness and empathy. And yeah, I hope that kind of shows through in my work and in my relationships that I have with folks.
That is so nice.
Mhm.
And really gets me into know a little bit more about your ripple effect, right? Because you have a story, you have your values, and that speaks through your word and to your work. Now, decisions are also very important, and life is made out of decisions. Now, there are many decisions. And I am Maria podcast. I try to dive into one, two, or three important decisions that have led you to the life that you have today and the person that you are today. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm also still honestly reflecting on your last question. So I feel like sharing my values is a helpful way to give you and your listeners like a view into who I am, but also just more directly, like I'm a husband, I'm a sibling, I have two older brothers and three stepsisters. Um, I'm a fierce competitor. I'm very, very competitive, whether it's pickleball or a board game or trying to hit my annual targets in my business. I'm a former Division I athlete. I played golf in college. Um, I'm a uh, I'm a gluten-free person. I've had celiac disease. I was diagnosed when I was 13, so it's been a long time since I've been living the gluten-free life. Long before it was cool, by the way. Um, and I'm a sort of transplant into the Tampa Bay area. I grew up in New York, lived in New York City for many years, and now have been living here for the past 4.5 years with my husband and with our dog, Roscoe. So a little bit more fun look into who I am to round out your question. Um, but you asked about decisions and some of the kind of key decisions that have shaped my life. Is that right?
That's right.
So let's see. Well, I guess taking you back to when I was in high school, um, I mentioned I was a Division I athlete, golfer, and so I grew up being obsessed with golf. Like I would spend hours and hours outside with like chipping with a lob wedge, chipping golf balls into a 5-gallon bucket until my mom would like pull me off the yard to come in for dinner. And so throughout like middle school, high school, I started to get more and more competitive, going to tournaments. And I discovered this golf academy that was literally a school dedicated to people who were serious about becoming, about growing their golfing career. And so I went to their golf camp for 2 weeks in the summer of my after my freshman year of high school. And this is when I learned about the program. They have a year-round program. You come and you stay there and you go to school and you get world-class coaching. And I was like, this is incredible. Like I just spent 2 weeks here. I got so much better in 2 weeks. So just imagine what can happen if I'm here for a full year. So I came back from that camp, like begging and pleading with my parents to send me there that next sophomore year of high school. Um, but we all collectively decided that why don't I take a year to like really think about that decision because it was a big decision. And so for all of my sophomore year of high school, as I continued to play golf competitively in that area and travel around, I had to make a decision. Do I leave my friends? Do I leave my family and go to this boarding school to really dedicate my last 2 years of high school to a career in golf to try to get a scholarship to play in college? And ultimately, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. I just had such a fire and a passion inside me to pursue this. And I also had a lot of people, you know, believing in me and saying, like, Chris, you've got talent and you should invest, you should take the time to do this. And so it was not an easy decision, but um, it was something that really shaped some key moments, some key years of my adolescence, right? Junior and senior year of high school, going to a golf academy in South Carolina when all my friends were back in New York. Um, but it was an incredible experience. I kind of grew up fairly quickly, learning how to sort of be responsible for myself, take care of laundry and meals and all of those things. But also, I learned a lot about physical fitness, about mental wellness, about how to be a competitive athlete and skills that have served me really well in my corporate professional career. And fortunately, all of that preparation did lead me to getting a scholarship to play Division I at Davidson College in North Carolina, where I was able to play golf for the next 4 years.
Wow, that's a lot of discipline.
Hmm.
Back then, Chris, how do you learn that you had to listen to that call per se, to pursue your dreams, and not really to wait? Because when you're in that age, and many people can relate to this, you're discussing with your parents, and sometimes it's even education before any goals or dreams or hobbies.
Mhm. Well, I'll first just acknowledge that there's a tremendous amount of privilege to be in a place to be even making this decision, you know. So I don't take that for granted. Um, but you know, we really thought about what was important to me, and um, leaving my friends was probably the hardest thing at that moment. I'm an introvert. I I have some really amazing, deep personal friendships with people that I've known since I was 4 or 5 years old. But going out in the world and like meeting new friends and all of that is something that takes a lot of energy. So going to a brand new school with people I didn't know was a big outside my comfort zone. I was concerned about the quality of the education at this school because I was a pretty good student and I cared equally about, academic preparation for college as I did athletic preparation for college. Um, but I think at the end of the day, we, we did our due diligence and we made that decision, as a family. I was very lucky to have the support of my parents. That was kind of like my decision. To be honest, a lot of the students that were at this program, their parents sent them there, kind of like they wanted to push their their kids away from home and to go to this place. Um, and I'll say I was probably one of the few that was there with a real determination, and you said discipline, to like take advantage of every moment and every resource that was there for me. And naturally, I sort of gravitated towards people that were there that were in the same mindset. Um, and I think it's like in any pursuit, for people of that age, it teaches you a lot about making goals, making a plan to meet those goals, finding a group of people who are equally committed to those goals as you are, and having the support network. And yeah, I'm just beyond grateful for the opportunities that presented for me at such a kind of pivotal time in my life.
That's so beautiful, and very mature for you at that age to define your career goals and also your passion in a way, because it was also a career, but it came up from passion. You were discovering that you were good at it and you wanted it to follow. That's one decision.
Mhm.
Take us to the others.
Um, I think another pivotal decision for me was leaving my corporate job. Um, I, as you can probably tell, I'm like very driven. I like to do well. I told you I'm very competitive. So as I entered the workforce, I was always like, what do I need to do to do well in this job? What do I need to do to get promoted? How do I advance? How do I get ahead? And the first job I took out of college, the very first job actually was picking up range ball, like golf balls on the driving range, and one of those golf carts that had like the cage around it, like at the local golf course, because I was committed to not being the kid who moved home after college with his parents because he like didn't get a job. And I saw both my brothers do it. No shade, no shame, but I just didn't want to follow that path. And so as I was looking for a quote unquote like real job, I took a job at this golf course. But Soon after that, I took a job working in sales for a software company in Atlanta, Georgia. Also moving to a new city, and did that for about 18 months. Got another sales job, did that for another 18 months, and at that point, I had moved from Atlanta to Georgia to Louisville, Kentucky for another job, and I decided to move back to New York City for the first time to really like get my career going. And I took a job working in account management for a digital marketing research company. And I just, again, like hit the ground running. I went from sort of entry level account manager to running the organizational development team in 5 years. And it was huge growth, huge responsibility, huge opportunity. And then it all kind of came to a head when we sold the business. The founder retired, and we had new leadership come in, and it was just a complete misalignment. Speaking of values, like misalignment of values. And as the head of people and culture, the head of organizational development, my job was to really be espousing our values to the organization and get people excited about who we are and where we're going. And I was not personally excited about who we were becoming and where we were going. So it became really hard for me to be the face of that. And so I, again, it was like a big decision for me to then leave that job. And there was, you know, every about 18 months, I would say, in my career, I would kind of be thinking like, all right, what's next? What's next? And every time I was thinking, okay, this is great. I'm like moving up. I'm getting more responsibility. I'm getting, paid more money. The title is bringing more responsibility. But is this really what I want to be doing? Is this really what I'm here for? Is there anything more for me out in the world? And this kind of came to a head when that big leadership transition happened at my last company. And I just decided, you know what? I know that I don't want to be at this company. I don't exactly know what's next, but I know it's not here. And so I decided to leave. Fortunately, I had a little bit of a runway sort of to figure that out. But it came down to values again. And having a board of directors, I had people in my life who had much more experience than I did, and were willing to and knew me really well, so they could reflect back to me some of the concerns or decisions that I was making, if that like really felt aligned in their perspective as well. Because it's when you're in it, you can feel really trapped by the emotional intensity of the decision. And so yeah, I decided at the end of 2019 to leave that job. And soon after, I, kind of became my new career, which has evolved over time to become what I'm doing now as a keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and someone who believes passionately in this concept of ripple effect leadership that I've been sharing with hundreds of companies and thousands of people the last few years.
I don't know if you have ever thought that your life, at least how I am perceiving it, you are always taking action. Could be simple, but very intentional. And that's something we all can do starting today, starting tomorrow, creating a possible ripple effect around us. And you have been living in this ripple effect since, all everything you're saying, it has a ripple effect.
Mm. Yeah, you said the word intention, which is a word I care a lot about because I'm a very thoughtful person, just naturally. Like you can tell I speak kind of slowly because I take time to think about what am I going to say. Now, I think that served me well in many ways. Do at times I wish I could be the person who's like super quick on their feet and could just like talk really fast and come up with ideas. Like, yeah, sometimes I wish I could be that person. Um, but I've also learned that it's really important to honor our strengths and to lean into the value that we bring based on exactly those traits that the world needs, right? The world needs more of what I have, just the way that the world needs more of what you have. And so the world doesn't need a version of me that's trying to be somebody else. The world needs exactly who I'm supposed to be. And at some point, I'll turn off that thing that does the thumbs up bubbles on the screen.
Wow, that is so true. I want to ask you, what is one question that you ask yourself when you are at these crossroads and you need clarity?
I There's not a specific question so much as like a feeling that I tune into. Um, I guess along those lines, the question really is like, I mean, you asked at the top of this podcast, who am I? And I think in many ways that is the guiding question of these big decisions. And to be honest, almost like weekly, there are decisions that I make in my business that if I'm not careful in honoring really that question, who am I, as a guiding factor, suddenly my business in a week, a month, 6 months, 2 years could look completely different in a way that does not honor who I am. So, for example, there are so many distractions. I could today I could start my own podcast. I could set up my TikTok account and focus on sending viral videos onto social media. I could be doing LinkedIn lives. I could be writing a book. I could be doing online courses. There are so many things I could be doing in my business that quote unquote are things that I should be doing, perhaps based on what what experts tell me to do. But the question that I always come back to is like, well, is that really who I am? Is that really the best expression of of me? Are those pursuits really honoring the way that I want to be spending my time, that I want to be showing up in the world? Or am I doing those things just because I should? So that whole concept of like, you should be doing this versus what do you actually want to be doing and what is actually aligned with who I am. I would say that more than anything else has been a guiding factor in the decisions that I make in my business. Because when I spend 10 years in corporate being very successful, but also feeling like I'm not fulfilled in what I'm actually doing, I said, I need to flip that around and say, what is gonna make me feel fulfilled? And then what can I do to bring that to life? And so that was a lot of purpose discovery, right? In that time when I was leaving corporate to start my own business, I was like, I need to stop searching for something out in the world that's going to make me feel fulfilled and first figure out like, who am I? What is my purpose? And what can I be doing to bring that purpose to life? And it is like a daily challenge to stay anchored in that because, like I said, it's so easy to get distracted and pulled into different directions.
Mm. And not only distracted, it's the tension between control, the influence that you want to have in your life, but the most important thing is staying true to yourself.
100%. And I've like, there are times when I drift off of that because I hear a really good idea and I'm like, oh, I should be doing that. And then I spend 2, 3, 4 weeks doing that. And then suddenly I'm wondering why I feel so like I just have this sense of ickiness around how I'm being and how I'm showing up in the world. And it's like, oh, because I follow this thing that someone said I should do without really honoring. Well, is that really like in integrity with how I want to be running my business? No, actually. And so I think we're really quick to jump into those things without honoring that question. And especially in this space of thought leadership, training and development, I mean, keynote speaking, showing up, working with teams. like people need to hear and feel the real Chris Rollins in the room, and that's the only way the message is going to be impactful. And I think that's perhaps part of the reason why you felt really drawn to the message is because I was showing up from a place of real, raw authenticity, beliefs, and things that I absolutely, with my skin and bones, believe and value, and that you can't like fake that. You can there's people there's a you can smell inauthenticity pretty quickly, pretty easily.
You took me back again to when I heard you the first time, and it's totally true when it comes to that vulnerable story, because the way you started um, the space was with your story, with one decision that you wanted to share with all of us. In that moment, everybody was just like, whoa, I want to hear more about you, about that, and about everything else that you want to say.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to also be, I take professional development and my craft very seriously. So I invest a lot in training and learning how to be a better storyteller, learning how to be more vulnerable, learning how to connect with people. And I've learned that, the way that we communicate from the stage, especially early on, is going to sort of determine the connection or lack of connection that you have with the audience. And so someone said it really well after one of my events. They said, gosh, Chris had to take such a risk getting up there and tell his story. And if you know anything from Brene Brown, she talks about vulnerability as that feeling when you're up against something with risk, uncertainty, or emotional exposure. And when you have the courage to show up in the face of those things, that's this expression of vulnerability, and people honor and respect that. And so it brings them into your world, and it creates connection. And I've been talking a lot more about the state of the world and how we need more human connection, and how we're not really seeing, truly seeing and hearing one another. And so I think stories are a big part of that. And the more we can listen, share our stories, connect, the more empathy and understanding there will be. And I think that's a pretty optimistic and promising recipe for bringing people together through pretty divided times.
There you go, the ripple effect.
Mhm.
And it's not only for our generation, but truly to the ones that are coming, right? With our word, with the purpose you're doing, it truly is going to resonate with us, but also with the younger generation and the new leaders. Chris, you usually teach leaders, right, to find alignment between what they believe and how they can lead. What does that alignment feel like for you on your personal level?
Um, yeah, it's a good question. I think it goes back to, okay, so what's coming up for me is this the evolution of my business in the last 6 years. And I mentioned to you how important it is for me to feel aligned in like who I am and what I'm doing. And I think there's like signals and cues that we're all getting all the time about that's like information and data that tells us, should I be doing more of this or less of this? Is this aligned with who I am and what I want to be doing, or is it misaligned? And I think a lot of the times we're moving too quickly that we don't take the time to pause and like actually listen to those thoughts and tune in to how we're feeling about certain things. And so, for example, my business started the first couple years primarily as a coaching business. So I was spending a lot of time on Zoom like this, one-on-one with clients to help support them through their own leadership development, career transitions, dealing with challenging situations at work. And after doing that for a couple of years, I kept noticing like, I'm like not really looking forward to that session as much as I usually am. And hmm, I'm feeling a little bit more distracted while I'm in these coaching sessions that I normally am. And hmm, I'm actually kind of like glad that that session's over because it was like taking a lot of my energy. And so all these things, I'm like, what is this telling me? And at the same time that I was having these feelings, I was sort of getting introduced to this world of speaking. And I just couldn't consume enough information about it. I couldn't do enough sessions around speaking. So just like tuning into those cues and those thoughts and those feelings that say, okay, I think I need to scale back on the coaching and really ramp up the speaking. And that was both a gradual transition and also a very intentional decision. And certainly when I come through the end of the year, that's when I say, okay, next year I am fully pulling back on this. And so that's what I've said. I've had 3 coaching clients this past year and a half, 2 years that are sort of long-term clients. And I finally just told them like, this is it, December, and we're done. And I'll help you find a new coach and we'll transition and all of that. But um, just, it's one of those things that we need to honor what we really want, where we see and create space for where we're going.
I'm listening up to your words and I'm like, oh, Maria, you got too late to create, but not too late because you're having these conversations. So at least and getting to get a bit of it from you.
Yeah, there's
It
just
is.
something, yeah, there's yeah, I'm just thinking about the world of speaking, and it's really an incredible, job to have. I don't like think about it as a job, but um to be able to share my message more broadly and my ideas and my beliefs more broadly, I think that was part of the other pull that I was having away from the one-on-one coaching is to have a much wider impact, and it's been fun to see that grow.
And you speak a lot of being authentic, being truth to yourself. Um, how are you bringing this into your relationships, into the coaching that you're ready to live in the past as an evolution of your career? Um, yeah, and your work.
How do I bring the authenticity into it?
Yeah.
Um, I think the biggest part of it is this distinction between, how do I want to say this? Um, there's kind of 2 ways I think to approach building, at least in my business, like building my business. On one side, there's sort of like manufacturing products and services. And on the other side of things, there's like creating and expressing ideas as a way of creating products and services. So, for example, there's probably not a company out there who doesn't need some level of manager training. So when I first started my business, I was like, oh, there's such a big market for manager training. So let me create this program that I can go into companies and help train them on how to be a better manager. So I did a bunch of interviews with managers and past colleagues. I created this, 7-week program, 3 different pillars, all this different content. I spent all this time building, like manufacturing this program to help train managers. And I don't know how to describe it other than it was very much creation, like outside of myself. It's like very heady, like it was very intellectual versus like, what do I really believe about what it means to be a leader? And what are those beliefs rooted in? And how can I take that and communicate with managers about how to show up as better people in the workplace. And that's the work that is authenticity. Um, because you can get so distracted again by things that you can be doing, content that you can be creating. But I think the most impactful, the most uh, yeah, honest uh, content and ideas is going to come from an authentic expression of who you are. And so that's why I think story is so important. That's why I think it's important to focus on like who you are and what you believe. And if you can get clear on those things, then you can communicate a lot of these things more easily. But I think it's true for not just someone who's growing a business, but anyone who's navigating their career, to really get clear on who they are, what your values are, what your superpowers are, uh, and lean into those things as much as you possibly can. When I left my corporate job, I had a huge identity crisis. I was like, I don't even know. I've just sort of risen through the ranks so quickly. I've hardly spent any time in any of these jobs. And now I'm out, like I don't have a job. And like, what is my skill set? I've been in sales, account management, HR, organizational development. And after doing some of these assessments, which I think are actually really helpful, it just gave me some language to acknowledge that some of the things that I wasn't really giving myself credit for, like my ability to help people feel safe, to help people really feel like they're cared for, that's an actual skill. And I was just like, like I thought that was just being a good person. Like anybody can do that. But when we're so naturally like gifted with some of these things, you don't think about it actually as a skill that's a value to add to other people. And so I'm always telling people like reflecting people's superpowers back to them because it's so hard to see sometimes because it's just naturally part of who they are.
Wow. Gets my head. Asking so
What's
many questions.
yeah, what's percolating? What's spinning up there?
Well, honestly, it's like you're saying, you have powers that like I love architecture and on this path where I've been designing and creating, but I started to feel that superpower of speaking, telling stories, and also being a place where um, people like you will open up and share everything that you are, that you have gone through life, because it's real stories. And when I speak to other people, it's like, Maria, you have that superpower. And it's like it goes along to the words that you're saying. And I thought it was just
Hmm.
something that I had, and that I was social sometimes because I'm very shy. But so wow, it's not only what you bring and that you can create in your professional life, but it's also what you have as a person.
Yeah, it's that's distinguish the distinction between like what you're doing and who you're being. And who we're being is very much, I think, a reflection of the things that we value and some of these like superpowers that we have. And you kind of just like feel someone's energy when they walk into a room. You can sense their energy when you're around them for just a few minutes. That's who they're being, which in many cases can be a superpower. Like there's people in my last job who are always like high strung, like anxious, stressed, right? It's just like who they were being constantly was like you'd see them rushing through the halls to get to the next meeting. You see them rushing to this next. That's just kind of who they're being, and that impacts the room. That creates a ripple effect without you even realizing it, right? And so how we carry ourselves, the energy that we bring, the presence that we embody, that creates a ripple too. And I always say like it's not just what you say, but it's what you don't say that can cause ripples. And we just have to get more present to the impact that those ripples are having on other people. And that's why, being thoughtful and curious and humble is such an important skill because it allows people to self-reflect and see themselves in the way that other people are experiencing them and their leadership.
Wow. I want to ask you, what makes someone part of your personal circle? You know, the people who help you to stay connected to your truth. Because as you're saying, that person has a ripple effect. So, what's a ripple effect on you?
Um, what makes someone part of my personal circle?
Right. How do you choose your war of directors? I think you call it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there are people who I don't think any relationship is easy. Like relationships take commitment and work and mutual contributions, right? But I think, you get to know the people who really listen and who really care. And I think it's the people who make me feel most safe, seen, and heard are the people that I want to spend more time with, the people that I want to talk to, the people that I want to share my challenges with, because that's when I'm in that space, that's when I share my truth. When I am worried about, being judged or whatever else, like that's not when the real stuff's going to come through. So, um, that's just a sense that I have is like people who really listen, people who don't judge me, um, people who are, willing to reflect back, ask thoughtful questions. Those are the relationships I value.
How do you recognize when something or somebody is aligned or misaligned with your energy, and what do you do to those?
Um, you know, I'm not the best at creating like relationship boundaries. So, because I sort of orient myself towards being like inclusive and kind and, spending time with people and saying yes to things. And, um, I think this is a harder one for me. Because I don't like to let people down. I don't like to disappoint people. This is a sort of shadow thing that I have, right? It's like not wanting to let people down or disappoint others. So um, if I'm being honest, I think sometimes when I'm feeling like misaligned around energy or values or whatever, my first my first line of defense is to kind of let those relationships like just sort of fade, just like not put much energy into it and kind of just like let them be. Now, if it's the case where that other person is like persistent and like building a relationship when I feel like there's not alignment, that's where I then have to, kind of share with them that my priorities and the way that I want to spend my time is just sort of in different areas. Uh, but again, that's really hard for me to do. What about you? Does that come more naturally for you, or is that a challenge for you too?
It's actually a challenge, but I think there's ways to communicate and not to get into like, hey, Um,
Hmm.
but as you're speaking, Chris, it takes me again back to your words and the way you started the conference. It was very authentic, and you started telling one decision and something that you had to communicate to your dad, that was
Mm.
something that was going to change your life in a way. And now that you're saying I don't like to let people down, I'm like, whoa, that's so, you were so strong and you had so much courage at that moment to know yourself, to know what you wanted it for life. And I don't know, that's maybe the third decision also that you were going to share with us today, but Yeah, I want you to take us to that story, to that decision, and how hard and how good it is now.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for that. So for the listeners, one of the bigger moments, uh, and the more impactful moments in my life, and also in, inspiring the work that I do now, is what Maria is referring to, which was, when I actually then ended up going to college on a golf scholarship, uh, and they're like, again, like very committed, very disciplined, there to perform well, to get good grades. And at the same time that I'm managing the intensity of a full year sports athletic schedule, traveling most weekends, extremely demanding academics at, top liberal arts school, um, I realized that I had feelings for this guy that lives across the hall from me. And these were kind of new feelings for me. And it scared the crap out of me, because the, the fact that I might be gay was terrifying. And it just sort of felt very misaligned with the vision of a life that I was sort of expecting to have, and what was sort of quote unquote normal for people. And so, that became a very stressful time for me as I navigated that. And did I drink a lot in college because I wanted to cope with that? Yes. Did I get shingles because I was so stressed about it? Yes. Was it some of the most complicated times of my life? Absolutely. Um, was it also some of the most magical times of my life? 100,000%, because I was beginning to acknowledge and accept and come into who I really was. And while at first it was terrifying and crazy, the reality of how that actually, how I was stepping into that was also incredibly magical and affirming. Um, and so as I kind of came to terms with being gay throughout my, freshman year and that summer, I still hadn't really told anybody. And so I finally built up the courage to tell my brothers, and of course they thankfully were amazingly supportive, and um, were great about the whole thing. But then I wanted to tell my dad. And, I grew up in a household of mostly men. It was me. I was the youngest of three boys, and it was my dad and my mom. And very like masculine dominated house, and jokes, and plenty of gay jokes thrown around often, right? And so you never know how things are going to go. So I am sitting there at dinner with my dad across the table from him. He's visiting me at a golf tournament in Georgia. And I had made a commitment that I was going to tell him this night. And I was texting my friend Andrew under the table. I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. Like, I'm too scared. And he's like, you got this. You got this. And so, literally, at the last moment, when he's signing the check and I'm like barely eating anything because I'm so sick to my stomach, I finally said to him, Dad, I'm gay, and I'm happy. And this is the guy I'm seeing. And he literally drops the pen. There's a pen drop moment. And he says, wow, I'm so proud of you. That's awesome. And I was like, what? Like, that you're supposed to be angry. You're supposed to be mad. You're supposed to be upset. And then of course he like had a lot of questions and was kind of doing that whole thing. But the way that I felt really seen and accepted, as someone who craved that, uh, it was incredible. And that had a huge ripple effect on my life. It is part of the inspiration for the ripple effect of the work that I do today. And it's part of my, determination to help organizations develop leaders who create those same kinds of ripple effects for their people by applying this way of thinking of vulnerability and kindness and curiosity and empathy and humility so that people can feel safe, feel seen, feel heard, so they can build trust, build connection, and lead in a world that's craving more of both of those things.
That is so beautiful and very brave from you, because at the moment I'm sure a lot of things were bothering you, were giving you that fear, you know. Um, and I'm here wondering, what do you have to like unlearn or unfold from you, from your word in that moment, in order to build a life that feels like you?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is to not is to not prejudge other people based on how I think they might judge me. So, as someone who is gay and I live in Florida and I sometimes work and operate in more conservative spaces, I and I think rightfully so, I get a little bit nervous sometimes like how people might perceive or respond to me and or my message. And there's a balance there because there's a sense of like protection and safety that feeling is serving me for. At the same time, that the very act of trying to sort of stay safe and protect myself is also putting up these judgments to say, okay, who in this, like, who seems like a safe person, right? It's like there's a judgment that I then put on other people where sort of traditionally stereotypical people who I might think would have, take issue with me, my message, etc., they can be activating for me. Um, but I, this is the work, and I think this is why the message feels so vulnerable when I share it, is because I literally feel the emotional exposure and the risk every single time I share my message and share my story. So I can't fake that. It's very real. And so the work for me is always to honor my values, which is to reserve judgment, right? I shared that at the top of the show, to reserve judgment. Okay. So like this person, it seems like some person that they might like sort of be anti-LGBTQ or take issue or what have you, but like before I make that judgment, just like create space for understanding, for listening. And I believe that it's really hard to hate someone up close. So if I can be me and share my story, be kind, like I'm not sure what there is to hate about that.
Um, Chris, what's your toolbox? You know, every time we take a decision or anytime we're in a situation, we have a toolbox that goes along with us and that is there with us. You know, I go to nature, family, spirituality. It's something important for me. What is your toolbox?
Well, I shared a couple. One would be going back to my personal values. Two would be connecting with my personal board of directors. Um, I would say three is just like personal alone time. Um, I'm going to be away for a week starting on Saturday, and I just already know there's going to be a lot of like opportunities for downtime, for reading, for reflection, and journaling, having a question, writing the question down, coming back to it later. I remember times when I was in my corporate job still and feeling this real dissonance between who I am, who I wanted to be at work, and who I'm supposed to be at work. And it was really hard for me. And there were literally times when I'd be sitting at my desk and I'd be so frustrated and so stuck, feeling like, what do I really want to do? I would leave my desk. I would go downstairs to the coffee shop with a journal. I'd order a coffee and I would write down questions. I'd be like, why can't you just be grateful for your job and be happy with what you have? It's like just like these really intense, like things that are like the conversations that are happening in my head that I just wanted to get on paper. You know, I just remember that being a big one of like feeling really unsatisfied and caught between wanting to be fulfilled and like gratitude for what I have. And I think it's a trap that we all kind of get stuck in, because I think we can ultimately be really grateful for what we have and like create a path that's more aligned with who we are and we want to be. Um, so yeah, questions, journaling, reflecting is always been a tool for me. Always.
Go inside and
Yeah, go in, internal.
let it out. Let it out.
Yeah.
Chris,
Mhm.
I think I know the answer, and the answer might be no, but looking back, would you change anything?
Would I change anything? I'm sure there are things that I would change. Um, this is like a little personal, but um, I ended up dating the person that I met in college for 6 years. Like the very first person that I mentioned that, I sort of like had feelings for him and it just became this journey of kind of, self-discovery kind of with each other, if that makes sense. And we did it for 6 years. And so on one hand, I know and I knew it wasn't the right relationship for me, but there was this like intense emotional connection that I had with that person. So I like couldn't quite understand how to not be with them. And so I go back and part of me is like, oh, I regret spending so much time in that relationship when I think deep down I knew it wasn't for me. But on the other hand, I don't think I would have fully learned this idea that just because you love someone doesn't mean they're the right person for you. Love is not enough. I could love my partner with every fiber in my being, but that doesn't mean that we should be together, right? And so I don't think I would have learned that lesson if I had left that relationship a lot earlier. Um, so that's just what's coming up for me. There's, I'm sure, plenty of other decisions along the way, um, that I may have handled differently, but I am grateful, beyond grateful, that I get to do what I do today and to share my message with the world and to meet people like you and to keep the impact going.
Yeah. Chris, I don't want to go. I'm conscious of time, and this is my very last question for today.
Mhm.
I hope we can connect again. Um, what would you like people listening to take away from this episode?
You know, we didn't get like a lot into sort of my ideas around the ripple effect and I think how it like manifests and shows up at work and what you can do as a leader to really embody and embrace the principles of ripple effect leadership. But, and if you want to learn more about that, like please like connect with me, follow me on LinkedIn, follow me on Instagram, do all that stuff. But um, I think I think the best thing that I can share with people is to help them get more aware of the impact that they're creating every day when they may not realize it. So one of the things I always share is like, think of yourselves as the pebble. You're the pebble causing ripples everywhere you go. The energy that you bring, decisions that you make, the actions that you take, the words that you use, the way that you communicate, all of that is having, impact far beyond what is immediately apparent. And so I think being a good leader isn't just about, being really present in the moment. It's about understanding that the energy you create in that moment becomes permanent far beyond that moment itself. And so to just really get present to the impact that you're creating on other people, to really open yourself up into this concept of ripple effect thinking, and to know that by bringing more vulnerability, more kindness, more curiosity, more empathy, and more humility, if we can all do that, just like little pebbles out in the world, creating these positive ripples with each other, we can all do that at scale. Just think about the momentum shift that we can all have in our culture, in the world, and our culture on teams at work as well.
And that right there, it's a perfect way to have this episode as a to be continued part 2. You can, ask a lot of questions, leave us in the comments, because I definitely want to speak with you, Chris, again. And for me, it means that really alignment isn't a destination. It's totally a rhythm. One that asks us to keep checking in, keep adjusting, keep listening. And speaking to you, Chris, today reminded me that purpose isn't found in the noise. It's built in the small, in the honest choices that keep us close to who we are. Thank you again for being here. And thank you for listening to I Am Maria podcast. And if this episode resonates with you, share it with someone who might be in the middle of their own realignment. Until the next time, thank you for being here. This is I Am Maria podcast.